Welcome back to the Weekly Huddle YouTube channel. My name is Owen, and this week is draft week. It's the most wonderful time of the year. And in this video, we're going to be discussing the offensive sleepers in this draft, one from each position. And we have a lot to get through, all 11 players, so let's hop right into it. Right up first, we have quarterback. My quarterback for the sleeper offense is going to be Kyle Trask, quarterback out of Florida. Now, he isn't a sleeper in the case of someone who is super late in the draft and maybe like a decent backup, but I think Trask has been slept on as a potential starter to come out of this class. He performed well at Florida. He is very limited athletically and needs to get polished up. He's very clunky with his mechanics. If he were to go to somewhere with like a Jordan Palmer and get his footwork cleaned up and his throwing mechanic down and increased, he could be one of those guys like Mac Jones in this class who could work well with maneuvering in a pocket and throwing to a multitude of good receivers. I think he's a lot closer to being in the top 5 quarterback conversation than Kellen Mond is, my honest opinion, and is being slept on by a lot of analysts who don't think he's going to be able to be anything other than a strong backup in the NFL. I think he could be a low-tier starter for some of these teams out there who have the opportunity to have him sit on the bench and learn how to restructure his game. And if he can do that, I think he has the upside of a starter. At running back for our sleeper offense, we have Chuba Hubbard, another player who suffered from the opt-out of 2020, where he did play a few games, but he was banged up a little bit and just didn't look the same until he opted out of the rest of the season, mostly because he knew that Oklahoma State wasn't going to have a lot of their games anyway, and he didn't have a real good start to the season, so he decided that he was going to opt out and prepare for the draft anyway. The thing about Troopa Hubbard is, in 2019, he looked phenomenal. So there's that player in him somewhere. He has good contact balance. 2019, obviously. 2020 was not even close to indicative of him. He has the breakaway speed. He has the ability to play both the outside zone and inside zone. Has decent vision. Can improve as a pass blocker. Wasn't really utilized in the pass receiving game a lot, but I think he has upside there. And I think because of his injury-riddled 2020 plus the early opt-out of the season, after I believe it's only 4 games, that people are allowing that to sour their taste of him, whereas someone like Rondell Moore, they'll just throw out the tape because, there's a great 2019 film, so let's just look at that. If you just looked at Chuba Hubbard's 2019 film, he is one of the top running backs of this class, so I think he's being slept on a little bit as one of the top running backs, and whereas people have him going to like maybe the 4th, 5th round, I think he's much more high upside than people think he is. At left tackle, we have yet another person who suffered from the 2020 opt-out, except to an even more extreme with Walker Little, offensive tackle out of Stanford. He tore his ACL in 2019 after being projected to be a top 10 overall draft pick in that class. So after tearing his ACL in 2019, he just decided, I'm going to return to school for 2020, so that way I can prove I can bounce back from this and I can maybe reestablish myself as a top 10 overall pick. Well, coronavirus happened, and him being a larger man who could be more susceptible to having ill effects to it, decided to opt out of the season. So he effectively hasn't played football in 2 years due to his injury. Even if you were worried about his ACL tear, having another full season of no football strenuous activity, like game-wise, to let it heal, should be very encouraging. And despite him being a top 10 overall player talent-wise back in 2019, he's going to be there in like the late second, third, maybe even 4th round because people haven't seen him play in 2 years. So a team like the Ravens, the Bills, the Chiefs, the Bucks, any of those teams picking late with the first, who may potentially have needed tackle down the road, could grab this guy and without having to sacrifice a lot of resources and find one of the steals of the draft because of the unknown factor of him not having played football. His mechanics are sound. He's a little less of an athlete than you'd like at left tackle, but he more than makes up with it with the technique and has serviceable athleticism to play left tackle. He's just not going to be one of your uber athletic guys. So I think he's getting slept on as one of the better tackles in this draft class. Now at left guard, we have a guy here in Jackson Carman who played left tackle at Clemson, protected Trevor Lawrence's blind side while he was a starter there. But I think he projects way better as a guard. When he was a tackle, he struggled frequently with college-level edge rushers getting bend and speed around the corners. And moving into guard will minimize that amount of angles and area around that the people can just outrun him and outrun his limited athleticism to the edge. And it'll allow him to take advantage of his extreme power at the point of the attack and the block, and would prevent him from having to switch over to the right side, where learning to switch sides as an offensive lineman is very difficult, as attested to by other offensive linemen who played in the NFL. So it's just sliding him into left guard. He has the experience on the left side, and you can utilize his strong run blocking and his strong hands and just his overall power while not having to put him out on the tackle spot, leaving him vulnerable to being attacked by speed rushers who will take advantage of his lack of athleticism. Now at center, we have a guy, I don't know if I can call him a sleeper, but I think I can consider him one just because I believe if he went to anywhere other than Wisconsin Whitewater, Quinn Miners would have been considered a first-round player, because the amount of athleticism and technique on display for someone coming from a Division III school is astounding. Like he truly dominates on film, that in a way that you thought a Division I prospect should dominate against a Division III school. Except it's only him, and he's just mowing people down. He has that nasty edge to him. I feel like if he went to Alabama instead of Wisconsin Whitewater, we'd be talking to him in the same breath as Creed Humphrey and Lander Dickerson, maybe even higher. He's just that much of an athletic freak, and he's a great personality. I just think that maybe his technique, because he didn't really need to utilize that a lot in the D3 level, is going to be a little bit of a learning curve. But like I said, if he was available to go to D1 and learn his technique from D1 coaches, he could probably be the best interior alignment in this draft class based off athleticism alone. So I think he's being slept on a little bit just because he didn't have the traditional path to the draft as most other players in this draft class do. At right guard, I'm not trying to be a homer here for coming from Buffalo, but we have University of Buffalo's Coyote Awusica. He played right tackle in college, and then switched over to left tackle this past season. He has come out and stated that he prefers to play on the right side and would like to switch to the right side in the NFL, as well as he's been training at both tackle and guard. He's another one of those guys who has power and is serviceably athletic enough for a college tackle, which means he probably won't be athletic enough to play for an NFL tackle, seeing as there's a big jump in the athleticism when you get to that next level. As well, he was struggling with speed rushers and things like that in the MAC. So a move to guard is probably for the best. So he's sticking over on the right side where he's more comfortable at the guard position, where he can utilize his power in the run blocking game. And he has strong hands in the pass game as well. He just may need to learn a little bit of technique. So this is a guy who some people even have going as an undrafted free agent. I have could be a potential like 4th round steal at right guard. In right tackle, I had a little trouble figuring out who I wanted to go here, but I finally settled on Tommy Doyle out of the Miami of Ohio, another smaller school guy, so that's one of the things that's contributing to him being slept on. But I think his size, he's a giant 6'8", 330. He's just a monster, and he has decent athleticism for his size. So if he was smaller, he'd probably have amazing athleticism. So it's that combination that's kind of scary. So having only that average athleticism for a tackle and having the experience of both right tackle and left tackle, I think he'll fit best as a right tackle in the NFL. He's a better run blocker than he is pass blocker, which in the NFL, unless you're blocking for, like, say, a left-handed quarterback, having your pass blocking lacking behind your run blocking is more traditional than that of right tackle, because quarterbacks are able to see that tackle and can move around it more than the blind side. So he projects best to play at right tackle in the NFL, at least right away, until he gets his pass blocking down a little better. But that size, and with the level of athleticism and strength and run blocking prowess he is a good project you can grab in like the 5th, 6th, 7th round and be able to project that to right tackle right away, and then hopefully have him switch over to left tackle eventually down the road. At tight end, I was debating going between a couple different people who are being mentioned on other videos, but I wanted to stick with who I think is being slept on. Maybe, like I said, these aren't sleepers in your traditional sense, where they're going to be people who are super late round picks that you're going to be shocked and amazed that they'll be half decent instead of just like a body in camp or things like that. But Tommy Tremble out of Notre Dame needs to be getting more conversation than just like, oh, he's a 3rd round tight end who's a blocker and things like that. Like Joseph DeGuara was one of the comps someone gave for him. I think he is, if anyone is to be the George Kittle of this class, I think it's going to be him. He is an amazing blocker, and the biggest knack on him was that he didn't have any receiving in his college career, but it's like they had Cole Kmet when he was before the season. Then they had this freshman, I'm forgetting what his name was, come in, and he's just like amazing. He's going to be a future first round pick. So he didn't really have all the chance to play that receiving role at tight end while at Notre Dame. So he was just their best blocker at tight end, while also, showing athleticism enough that I think there's some untapped potential receiving wise there. The NFL teams can go out and get. I think he's a more developed Dawson Knox type player, where Knox was a converted quarterback who his biggest thing was he didn't get a lot of pass targeting in college, but people saw the athleticism and knew that he was able to do that kind of thing. But he also couldn't block as well. So I think he's more developed in the blocking area, definitely, with strong hands, and can be, even though his body's a little undersized, so he's probably more of like an H-back or off-the-line tight end, he still has good blocking mechanics and hands and things like that with the athleticism and the showingness enough in college to be able to prove that if some team can coach him up and utilize him well enough, he can be a deadly receiver in the NFL. At our first outside wide receiver, I have Tamorrion Terry, wide receiver out of Florida State University. I am super high on this guy. I know a lot of people have him in like 5th, 6th round, but I have him as like a borderline first round, like a second round player. If anyone is to be the DK Metcalf of this class, it's going to be him. Long, strong wide receiver who's deceptively fast for his size. His long legs allow him to eat up a lot of ground very quickly. His route tree is very underdeveloped, as well as he doesn't seem like he was like worked enough in practice on route running, catching, like the basics, which is common because like these Florida State players always come out with this super high athletic like upside, but the coaching, the stuff that you can gain as a prospect from like good coaching just lacks. So I think that's what we're seeing here, and people may be concerned about his character's concerns, but the reason he left the team last year, I believe I read somewhere that it was a disagreement with the Florida State coaching staff on how they were handling the COVID protocols, and he was just frustrated with it, and he ended up leaving. Erasing that, because that is just something that was out of his control, he was upset, and if anything, he's more on the right there. He's a player who led the 2019 NCAA in yards after the catch, or I believe it's either yards of the catch or yards off of screens. He ran him at quarterback and wildcat formation. A lot of designed runs, a lot of designed screens. He just wanted to get the ball in his hands, and even at his size, he shouldn't be able to move the way he does. So I think he's just a rare blend of size and speed, and that if you can actually coach him up, unlike what Florida State was able to do, he can be that kind of big-time outside receiving threat. Maybe a downfield threat to begin his career, but he'll be able to work his way up as a player who can really become that all-around person like a DK Metcalf, who I comp him to. At slot, we have Dwayne Escridge, wide receiver out of Western Michigan. The reason I have him as slot is only because he's at 5'9". If he was any taller, I'd have him as an outside receiver and even higher up my board than he is. He's only 5'9". He is age 24 and is relatively new to the position, transferring over from cornerback. But I think that is a blessing in disguise, because playing cornerback for as long as he did, he understands how to defeat presses and things like that from corners that he faces when he's on the outside, because of how much of an understanding of the position he does have. So despite him being smaller, he could play outside, but I think the NFL is going to typecast him as a slot. Despite that, he has true like game-breaking speed levels and has sure hands, can high point balls. If there wasn't a Jalen Waddle in this class, this is probably my favorite comp to like Tyreek Hill that they always make every year. It's kind of scary because like the size and speed and everything, I think it is a pretty good Tyreek Hill comparison. So I'd say keep a lookout for him. The only knacks I really have on his height is in his age and his relative recency to the position. And finally, our last outside wide receiver is Cornell Powell, wide receiver out of Clemson. He was buried on the depth chart behind guys like T. Higgins and Mike Williams and all these guys who went high in the draft these past few years. So he was never able to really take the bull by the horns, and he's not going to be better than those guys. But as a guy who had 1 year to actually start, he performed decently well. I know Trevor Lawrence was throwing him the ball, but he really gained a rapport with the backup quarterback there when Lawrence was out due to COVID. So I feel like if he was able to get put into a situation like he was in college, where he was drafted to a team who was deep like KC, Buffalo, Tampa Bay, where he can hide on the roster and really develop behind the starters, and then in 3, 4, 5 years down the road, on a second contract, he can be a special teams player for the first contract. Second contract, he can come out and he can actually be a decent receiver, as we saw in college, where he sat behind these better players, learned from coaching and learned all this stuff, and then in his final season he came out and had a pretty good season. So I think he can be one of those guys that, like, you draft him in the 7th round or as a priority free agent, and then you just stash him on your roster for 3 years, and then when, say, like, a player leaves because they're too old or you don't want to pay them the contract, he steps in and he shows out that you didn't think he could, and you get this definite, like, it's a long-term pick, but I think that's what you're going to be looking for in these later rounds. And I think Cornell Powell, out of anyone in those, like, 6th, 7th round receivers, is going to be able to project to being a starter in those later rounds. So that's my all-sleeper offense for this upcoming 2021 NFL Draft. Tomorrow I'll be doing the 2021 NFL Draft all-sleeper defense, so stay tuned for that. Like, share, and subscribe. Check out Macro Sports, which is where I'm writing articles for now. I just did NFL Draft Matchmaker for different prospects, all the teams, as well as I wrote an article writing up the player capital for someone who's going to be on the 2021 NFL Draft sleeper defense. So check that out, and I'll see you next time.